Okay, I again had some downtime and I was thinking about the counteroffensive and thinking about how, particularly how you all are processing things, how I'm processing what's going on. And there are 7 key ideas that I want to share with you about how to think about what's happening in the counteroffensive. First thing is this: it's hard waiting for the information. I know it is. Everybody knows that there's a lot riding on this. The Ukrainians know that. Their partners know that. Particularly when they're thinking in terms of, if they don't do well, will the partner support still be here? And I get that. That's just the way that it is. But just relax with that. And you know, in time, I used to say that time was on Ukraine's side, where Russia thinks that time is on their side, because Ukraine is getting stronger by the day. But now I've come to realize that there's a curvilinear relationship, right? So Russia still thinks time's on their side because they think they can burn out their allies. For Ukraine, they get stronger up to a point, and then it'll start to curve. That's what a curvilinear relationship it is. It goes up, and with it, and then at a certain point, there's diminishing returns. So I think that's a legitimate thing, but I think we're a long way from that. Okay, point number 2. Don't worry about today. So you want to look for the trend. So I know that we want to see the battle maps, and we want to see ground taken, and we want to see, you know, this army did that and the Russians had this happen to them, and don't worry about it. It's kind of like if you're losing weight, same kind of issue. If you're losing weight, you want to worry about what the trend of the scale is week over week, not day over day, because today you might be up a couple pounds, or tomorrow down a couple pounds, and then back up. And it's going to, but as long as the trend keeps going the right way for Ukraine, or down for people who are losing weight, it's okay. So don't worry about that. Number 3, don't worry about the amount of ground that's taken. So it's going to be slow going. The Russians have had upwards of a year to defend the entire border and make their defenses. So we have to have expectations that are realistic. And what I mean by that is, like, the Kharkiv offensive was absolutely fascinating because it was so much ground so quickly. We're not going to see that again, probably. We might see something, but I wouldn't count on it. Okay, so we need to tamp our expectations down and be realistic. And you're in the face of a determined enemy who's not giving up, and I'll talk more about that in just a little bit. And then Jake Bro did this thing yesterday where he showed the real-time battle map of D-Day invasion and what happened after. It took 6 weeks to gain the amount of ground that they've gained in the last 5 days on Omaha Beach and Utah Beach, and then before they could break through and get out into France. So, and there's going to be a breakthrough, and 50% of Ukraine's forces are in reserve waiting for the breakthrough to deploy them in the right place. So just give it time, okay? They've taken at least, and this was as of about 4 or 5 days ago, 100 square kilometers, or about 40 square miles of ground. And we know that they've taken at least that, and they'll take more. We don't know how much that's cost in human capital, like how many people are killed or wounded in that process. Now, let's talk about that. Number 4, don't worry about casualties and losses. There will be casualties, there will be losses. We know that that's going to take place. So don't worry about that. It's going to be higher than what it was before, because when you're attacking, it's a very different game than when you're defending. But when you hear the Russians talk about 10-1 or 13-1, I calculated at one point that the Russians were saying, they lie about stuff all the time. Don't worry about that kind of thing. Are they losing vehicles? Yes. Combat Veteran Reacts. I did a thing a few days ago where he was talking about, like, this is what tanks are for, and some are going to get lost in the process. That's the way it works. Or you hear about the armored personnel carriers that were being blown up. Well, armored personnel carriers weren't meant to be tanks. Tanks are meant to be tanks, and so that happens to armored personnel carriers. Okay, but in general, they're going to lose tanks, and that's just part of the game, right? There was a U.S. general who said that the Russians have showed the same 10 tanks 100 times from different perspectives for their propaganda value. That's going to happen. Now, there's more than 10 tanks, but his point still stands. They're going to get as much propaganda headway out of that as they can. Okay, number 5, important thing number 5. Don't worry about time. pretty much every army goes to war thinking this is going to be a short war. We're going to be home by Christmas. It never happens, or rarely does it ever happen, right? So it's going to take longer than you think. I think by Christmas, we're still going to be in the war. I don't think it'll be over, but I think the Ukrainians will have shown that they can take some ground and make some progress, and that's really what's important. Okay, important thing number 6. Don't worry, when it's still going on, or because it's still going on. And what I mean by that is that, like, look, we're on day almost 480 of a 3-week special military operation. So that it's still going on is actually a feather in Ukraine's cap, because it was supposed to be over in no time flat. I mean, you had an invasion force of 200,000 that was already armed, prepared, equipped, coming on a largely not quite prepared Ukraine that didn't have defenses in place and didn't, like, they had maybe some plans, but they didn't have it together like they do now. They're actually far stronger. They have more weapons now. They have all these things in place that they didn't have before. So don't worry about that kind of thing. By the way, Russia's not going to stop, right? Russia is determined to keep pressing this. The powers that be in Russia want to see it continue to go. So they're determined to keep going, and they're going to go until they can't. But at the same time, on the other side of that, Ukraine is even more determined not to stop. For Ukraine, this is an existential crisis. I have no concerns that they don't have the will to fight. They're going to keep fighting until they cannot fight anymore, or preferably until Russia can't fight anymore. And I think that's what's going to happen. And then finally, last point, focus on what you can control. You can inform yourself, that's good. You can spread this kind of message to those that need to hear it, that's also good. You can donate. We haven't forgotten those who were affected by the dam just within the last couple of weeks. And you can pray. You can do all those things. Listen, I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for your likes, your shares, your subscribes, being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine. This stuff's important, and I'm glad that you're with us. But I hope that that helps you understand and be able to process how to process the counteroffensive.